Ladies and gentlemen, it's taken me a little while to get here, but finally, let's talk about Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Xanathar's Guide to Everything is the newest book that's come out for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and it gives the players a bunch of new choices to make for their game. But do these new choices really hold up? Well, let's take a look at a few of them and the new features that the book's going to give us, and see what's worth it and what's not. Break open your copy and let's roll some dice. The first thing that you'll notice in each of the sections for characters is that there's a bunch of different aspects that your character can have now. Like the Barbarian, for instance, has got personal totems, it's got tattoos, it's got superstitions. They offer some deepening of character, and if you add them to your character's description, then you'll have a little bit of extra backstory and mannerism to go with. The Druid's tables are like treasured item, guiding aspect, and mentor. The Ranger has like views of the world, homeland, and sworn enemy. These are all tables on which that you roll a d6, and then you take that quality to be added to your character. I think it's a cool idea, but it would also kind of imply to a new player that these are things that you have to roll for. Like, since it's on a d6 table, it may stand to reason that you're supposed to get them randomly and that you shouldn't choose the one that you like, or even go outside the table and make stuff up from scratch. I do appreciate the inclusion of these tables because they act as an inspiration for the character's backstory that you may be writing up. They're also useful for randomly generating a character just off the bat if you don't have a lot of time, energy, or creative ink left in your inkwell, but you need something that's more than just that random generic character. It's pretty cool, honestly. Even if there's a shadow within me that might perhaps slightly resent them as like an easy cheater's way to generate character depth, each class from the player's handbook is given at least 1 and up to 3 new choices for their character progression. The first thing to note here is that they're all choices to make at extremely low levels in a campaign, and therefore very early in the game. So if you're already in a campaign and are past level 3, these choices are not going to be as useful for you unless you multi-class into a kind of different character type. I mean, like, if I'm playing the monk and I've gone Way of the Open Hand from the player's handbook, I get a bunch of really cool abilities, yes, but then Xanathar's comes out and I see, for instance, Way of the Drunken Fist. How cool is that, right? But since I've already chosen my monastic tradition, I can't use any of the stuff for my main class from this book or indeed any other book that comes out. I'm sort of stuck with my admittedly still awesome Way of the Open Hand. Now, of course, your DM could pull a sort of Deus Ex Machina style thing where you find a mirror in a sphinx's lair that allows you to look into it and see your true self, and if you look into it you can re-roll your character however you like at the same level with all of your memories and inventory and the like. My campaign actually just did this to us, and I ended up not choosing any of the new things from Xanathar's at all. But hey, the reason I'm sort of put out by this is that 4th edition got rid of the concept of a prestige class in favor of what they called Paragon Paths, which you get at level 11 of your class. That sort of loss of a prestige class concept carried over to 5th edition, but the lack of an early game character modifier probably was what pushed the creative team to make the advancement of a character's archetype choice something that you decide 3rd level or earlier. I mean, back in 3rd edition, you could decide to get a prestige class whenever you liked, so long as you qualified for it, and it didn't penalize your leveling because it wasn't really a multi-class that starts you at getting the stuff from level 1 of that class, so much as like an added later game modification of a bunch of the stuff that you've kind of already got. You could get a bunch of different ones, so you'd have pretty widely varied character types with all kinds of story elements and progressions that made them unique. I mean, I once had like a sorcerer, shadow dancer, duelist who was super awesome. In 5th edition now though, if you want to take a new path as a character past 3rd level, you basically have to downgrade yourself, while everyone who decides not to multi-class gets stronger and stronger. Xanathar's Guide does nothing to alleviate the same issue, but it does give you a whole lot of stuff that only young characters, or characters who invest at least 3 levels later in the lives, can get. Since the single-spaced list of options in this book takes up literally 2/3 of a page, we're just going to choose some of the ones that I like best, or else this video is going to be hours and hours long. Let's get started. Barbarians are already crazy to begin with. A vanilla Barbarian's Rage gives them resistance to a bunch of physical damage types, as well as more damage done and a host of other similar abilities. Then you get to choose your Barbarian path at level 3. The current paths we have available in the player's handbook, the Path of the Berserker and the Path of the Totem Warrior, are admittedly pretty cool. I mean, the prototypical Barbarian is the Berserker, and that path does it well. Then there's the Totem Warrior, who channels the energy of like a specific beast to augment them in battle. However, we get 3 new paths in Xanathar's guide: the paths of the Ancestral Guardian, the Storm Herald, and the Zealot. The one I like best is the Path of the Zealot, which is a sort of like deity-infused warrior whose destiny is to fight until time stops. You get an automatic extra d6 plus half of your Barbarian level each turn in combat, and that extra damage is either Radiant or Necrotic, you choose. You also get the ability to re-roll a saving throw once per rage, and as long as you are in rage, you literally cannot die. You don't go unconscious when you hit 0 HP, you still do have to make death saves, but you do so while still up and fighting. What I think is the neatest storyline ability, though, is that if you are dead, and a spell would bring you back to life as its sole function, something like Raise Dead or Resurrection, you actually don't need the expensive material components that are necessary to make that happen for the most part. The spell just straight up works, because your soul has been marked by your deity as destined to fight forever. I mean, how cool is that, right? Like, when you die, your soul just kind of waits near your body, impatiently tapping its foot until someone resurrects the body and you wake back up already swinging. Bards are, as you may remember, my favorite class because of their character diversity and versatility. Have you ever wished that your bard was just a little bit better at straight up fighting, though? Well, strap in, fellas, because in addition to all the normal benefits that the bard gets, you can take your bard college to be the College of Swords. These are the bards that don't play music. No, their performance is based on their weaponry. So like sword swallowing, knife throwing, and the like, their whole preferred methods of impressing people involve the feats that they can do with a cool weapon, and they have plenty of prowess to display. They get extra weapon proficiencies, they get to choose a fighting style like rangers and fighters do. They can use their bardic inspiration when they hit someone with a weapon to do extra effects, and after a while it doesn't even cost them a use of their inspiration to do those effects. These bards are like the frontline fighters alongside your fighters, your barbarians, and your monks. If I were not dead set on keeping the cutting words ability from the College of Lore for my bard character, I may very well have taken the College of Swords when my bard looked into the mirror that I mentioned a minute ago. In addition, this is actually the first Feywild-based subclass we see, the College of Glamour. We'll see a whole lot of Feywild stuff in this book. In fact, the 3 main themes of this book are weather, the Feywild, and deities. So look for those 3 things. Clerics get 2 new domains, but they're just kind of more domains. You choose them at level 1, and they have some interesting things, but they're really not that remarkable if you ask me. I mean, the ability to use scrap metal to form another metallic object like Full Metal Alchemist's alchemy is kinda cool, but it takes a long time, and it isn't really even that great. They do gain access to a couple extra decent spells, but those, like, that alone is just not enough to merit its having its own subclass in the thing. I mean, the most thematically appropriate spell that they get is Fabricate, but that's not really anything new. This is not to say that the Forge domain and the Grave domain that are mentioned in the book aren't cool, they're just kind of more priest stuff, really. Druids get 2 new circles, those of Dreams and the Shepherd. The Circle of Dreams is the second Feywild subclass so far, one that deals in Fey energy for healing, illusion, and kind of teleports and other telelocations. They seem like they'd be pretty cool to play in story, but their special stuff isn't really that impressive in comparison to, say, for instance, Circle of the Moon, which grants cooler wild shape abilities and things that scale better. Then there's Circle of the Shepherd, which is 5th edition's first actual summoner class. Summoning in any tabletop game is a slippery slope because adding 1 or 2 entities to a combat is okay or whatever, but then adding a whole bunch of them is insane for the DM and the players to try to keep track of. The Circle of the Shepherd isn't that bad. It just kind of like gives bonuses to some of the summoning spells that you may already have for the most part, but it gets weird once they hit 14 and can summon up to 4 creatures if they hit 0 HP as a sort of last resort dead hand trigger spell that gives them protection against the stuff that might be trying to eat their corpse. I think that's actually a really good ability. They don't do anything except defend you and attack your enemies if you don't command them, so maybe you set up a sort of triggered thing with like Glyph of Warding cast on a necklace or whatever, if your DM will allow you to do that kind of thing, that triggers when you die and has the spell Magic Mouth in it that would give commands to the wolves or whatever, something like drag my body away from my enemies or toward my allies or whatever. I mean, now we're just kind of metagaming a little bit, but hey, that's what this is all about. This is probably the best picture in the book. Fighters are a class that can be kind of generic, for lack of a better term, but I actually think that a lot of the subclasses that belong to the other classes in this book ought to belong in the fighter category. Stuff like the swashbuckler from later on in this book, which is the rogues, for instance. However, the fighters got a set of words that evoke a specific reaction from me when I read them. Because being a 3rd edition player and all of that, I missed having the prestige classes like we've already listened to me complain about, but in this book, it has these 2 words, Arcane Archer. Well, Arcane Archer is the name of a prestige class from 3rd edition. It required the person taking it to be able to cast arcane spells of level 1 or higher, and gave them a bunch of different abilities that augmented their arrows with magic. This fighter archetype gets a lot of the same effects, plus a few more abilities, way earlier on in the game. I suppose if you didn't take the archery fighting style, you'd be kind of out of luck for this subclass. But anyway, they also have the samurai for some reason, and the cavalier, which is actually pretty cool as well. I think fighters made out the best in this book. They got some of the best options out of it. Cavalier is something that I think we've been missing for a while, because mounted combat in 5th edition is underwhelming to say the least, but they get a bunch of cool stuff for while they're fighting on horseback. As if monks weren't already just bonkers to begin with, they get a bunch of new stuff in this book. 3 new subclasses. Like, they can already run up walls, they can stun lock enemies, they can never age or die of old age, they get to restore their own health. These 3 new subclasses add another wealth of possibilities that can definitely be used to break any combat encounter that your DM might throw at you. There's the Drunken Master, which I mentioned a little bit ago, which gets a huge number of attacks when fighting multiple people and is also hilarious. There's the Sun Soul, which allows for a bunch of different sort of like energy projecting abilities that essentially make you into Ken from Street Fighter. And then there's my personal favorite, the Kensei, which a lot of people would be like, oh no, it's pronounced Kensai. It's not, it's Kensei. Trust me. Kensei are the monks that train to the point of mastery with specific weapons, and can do crazy extra stuff with them. Essentially, these guys are like the Shaolin monks that use their key points to strengthen or sharpen or make better their weaponry attacks. I mean, you can even use weapons that aren't monk weapons as your Kensei specialty weapons, of which you get to choose 2, a ranged weapon and a melee weapon when you start into the Kensei school, which I think is pretty cool. So if I wanted to play the protagonist of one of those old school like Chinese kung fu movies where the main character's entire journey revolves around a specific weapon, this would be the guy to choose. Paladins are, in my opinion, a bit underwhelming in 5th edition. Like, especially with the way that they're portrayed in 5e, their general willingness to just start smiting at a moment's notice is not dissimilar to the Barbarians' proclivities. I might even go so far as to posit that the Path of the Zealot choice for the Barbarian is just a primitive version of the Paladin. Well, in 3rd edition there was a Fallen Paladin archetype prestige class that served darker powers and gained abilities from that, being called a Blackguard. There are some similarities between the Blackguard of the days of yore and the Oath of Conquest Paladin that we have in this book now, in stark contrast to the Oath of Redemption Paladin that we've got on the next page. One of them reveres violence as a mean towards an end, that of control and subjugation, and one treats violence as a last resort and tries their best to show everyone that they can be redeemed. Both will likely be prone to causing trouble in a party. I mean, the Conquest Paladin will show proclivity towards beating and breaking those that they see as foes, even if the rest of the party is less inclined to see in such black and white terms. And the Redemption Paladin will either object to or outright refuse combat with someone they believe is just misguided and could possibly be saved. Paladins cause problems, and I think that these are both no exception to that rule. The one thing that I really do like about the new Paladin stuff is the level 20 ability that the Redemption Paladin gets, Emissary of Redemption, where at level 20 it says you become an Avatar of Peace, which gives you blah 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 benefits. All the other Pally subclasses require you to spend an action to take on this other form, some sort of avenging angel or an avatar of this or whatever, but the Red Pally, Redemption Paladin, is always activated. They get resistance to damage of all types so long as it's caused by another creature towards them, and they have an aura that returns half of the damage they take back to the person who dealt it to them. Now granted, this aura stops working if you purposefully damage that creature, but it only stops working for that creature. Everything else still sucks at hurting you. I think it's actually pretty neat, and possibly pretty broken. We have arrived at Rangers, which are the unabashedly worst class in Vanilla 5th edition. This is so true that Wizards even released a sort of revised Ranger class option in their Unearthed Arcana series of like playtestable stuff that's technically non-canon. They get some pretty neat stuff, sure, I guess, but they're really outshined by pretty much every other class in every situation. I feel bad for them, honestly. Like, I like the idea of a ranger in-universe because of their unique lore and supposed abilities and backstories and that kind of stuff. Now, I said supposed abilities because the ranger that you're thinking of in your brain is not nearly as cool as the ranger that you get in the book, which is a shame. However, there's not really much to look at in these subclasses. That is, until we get to Monster Slayer. The two other archetypes in this book are okay, I suppose. Like, there's Gloomstalker, which is just kind of what a ninja is. It's like ambushes, darkness-based abilities, extra attacks, extra speed. It's a ninja. And then you've got Horizon Walker, which, I mean, it's so situational. It doesn't make a terrible lot of sense to me. They have the ability to, like, detect portals to other dimensions and planes, and just suddenly they get that at level 3 because that's how rangers work. They're a ranger, and then all of a sudden one day they're like, now I can see into other dimensions! Which, I mean, whatever. Their whole thing is that they don't like stuff from other planes and all that. But Monster Slayer, man. No, this is where things get interesting. They get the ability to look at a creature and just sort of magically know how to best go about killing it, which I think is rad. I mean, you basically become a focused, intense killer of specific creatures on your battlefield. Like, the combat starts, you look at a guy, and then shortly thereafter he is dead thanks to your knowledge of his weaknesses, your extra damage that you get from it, your counterattack and spell interruption abilities against it, your general resistance to everything that they could do to you, your Hunter's Mark ability. This character is the Oath Bow, but in player character form. Like, the Oath Bow is a magic item. I don't actually remember if it's in 5th edition. Basically, it's a bow, and if you knock an arrow on it and then whisper an oath to kill something, then it gives you a bunch of extra stuff. And this is that item in player form. I mean, I can just imagine them starting a fight, like drawing their rapier and kissing the back of it, and then murdering an enemy. This is the only good ranger subclass, and it's not even really that spectacular mechanically. It's just a cool idea wrapped up in a not-so-great class. One of the first characters that I ever played and developed in Dungeons & Dragons was a rogue, a sort of half-elf rogue gentleman. He was pretty cool. He took a swift beating in a face-to-face fight once and then decided that he needed a multi-class into fighter for a level or two to get some better combat experience and abilities. I mean, he was a pretty cool dude. In 5th edition, rogues can just do already crazy stupid amounts of damage if you build them the right way. Sneak attack is insane, doing things right will get you always surprising an enemy, acting first in combat, doing upwards of like 50 damage with a dagger on one attack. It's ridiculous. But to make it even harder for DMs to deal with, the new subclass Swashbuckler makes them not even have to worry about like hiding or multi-classing into fighter to be effective combatants. It's so broken. Swashbuckler is essentially what the prestige class Duelist used to be in 3.5. It makes a rogue, which is normally this like sideline backstabby secret fighter, into a frontline kite that aggroes the one big guy while everyone else kills off all the ads. You've got things like Rakish Audacity, which lets you get sneak attack damage so long as nobody's right next to you, even if the opponent is fully aware of you, which is, what? And you've got Fancy Footwork, which gets you in and out of a character's range without having to use disengage. You can hop in, make an attack on them, and then hop right back out, and you don't get attack of opportunity on you. It's crazy. And add to this the rogue's already crazy list of stuff like Uncanny Dodge and Evasion, and you have a character that gets up in a baddie's face, smashes him for like a third of his health in one hit, then makes the baddie chase him around and be generally bad at damaging him for the rest of the fight. It's a nightmare for a DM to try to plan around. You have to really start tailoring the combats to the idea that as low as level 3, you got a Swashbuckler. Or, like we have in my party, you could have a Totem Warrior Barbarian 3, Swashbuckler Rogue 6, and have someone that literally never takes damage ever from anything, even if you hit them. Try that on for size DM. Rogues also get a lot of other really interesting stuff. There's like a detective type class in the Inquisitive, where you figure stuff out about people. You've got the Mastermind, which is a sort of person who pulls the strings on the rest of their party. You've got the Scout, which is a ranger. It's a ranger. It's just a ranger! Rangers really get screwed out of everything, man. So Xanathar makes a lot of pretty wide steps, many relating to either the Feywild, the Divine, or Storms, like we mentioned a bit ago. The Sorcerer actually gets one of each in this book. Yeah, literally one of each. There's the Divine Soul for the Divine bit, and the Shadow Magic for the Feywild bit, and the Storm Sorcery for the weather-related bit. I swear, it's like Xanathar is obsessed with gods, fairies, and rain. We're gonna talk about Shadow Magic, which I actually think is kind of neat. The main thing that stands out for them is that right off the bat, they too get one of those BS abilities that saves them from dying if they hit 0 HP. Theirs only works if it's not radiant damage or a crit that does it, but when they hit 0, they can make a save to instead go to 1 HP because of their connection with the dark version of the Feywild. A whole lot of that in 5th edition these days, I think. The other thing that they get is pretty cool, is this ability to call like a shadow dog that basically acts like Alucard's terrifying dog arm thing from Hellsing. They also get a Shadow Step ability that allows them to walk from one shadow into another, up to like 120 feet away as many times as they like, which is ridiculous. Like, I'm so glad that rogues don't have that ability. Oh wait, this is just Shadow Dancer, the prestige class from 3.5, with a little bit less dance and a little bit more shadow. Sorcerers have one more choice in that Storm Sorcery origin. It's definitely pretty cool, but I feel like it's just the arcane version of the Tempest Cleric. I kinda want to try playing a Storm Sorcerer though, to be honest. They do seem really cool and could totally become an X-Man with powers like this. I love Warlocks. I love the idea of a Warlock. Warlocks are supposed to be scary. They've kind of made this deal with some super powerful being that grants them this terrible knowledge and these kind of arcane powers in exchange for them doing some kind of reciprocal task for the thing that's granted them those powers. They deal in darker stuff than most magic users. This is why I really don't get the celestial patron that we have in Xanathar's. This warlock has made a deal with something or another that's on the good side of the spectrum, this guy. This is their illustration for it. They get good powers from things. That's not what warlocks should be doing. I don't know. They gain powers from them suspiciously like a cleric might gain powers from a deity. My goodness, where have we seen this kind of stuff before? They get this sort of like lay on hands ability to heal people, as well as a resistance to radiant damage and extra damage dice on fire and radiant spells to be like a very holy cleansing fire angel type stuff. They have some stuff that helps them cheat death as well, and as a mechanic set, I actually really like the stuff they get because it mimics the Paladin, but with more spellcasting focus. However, that being said, it just doesn't sit well with me thematically. Maybe I'm being too picky, I don't know. Either way, their ability to heal, to grant temporary HP, and literally explode with light that heals friends and damages enemies is a pretty sweet set of abilities to stack on top of vanilla Warlock stuff. Their other choice, the Hexblade Patron, is kind of more in line with what I would have expected from a Warlock a little bit more, at least. But I feel like it really kind of forces your hand when you're playing it, because if you didn't take Pact of the Blade, and you took Pact of the Chain or Pact of the Tome or whatever with this, you'd be missing out on most of the good abilities that it can give you. I don't know, like Hexblade really gears a Warlock up to be a kind of frontline caster type fighter. Like really get up in people's faces with weapons instead of magic so much. There's a ton of new invocations as well. This is actually where the good stuff for warlocks come in, and I really like a lot of these ones. Like there's Aspect of the Moon, which makes it so that your character no longer needs to sleep and cannot be put to sleep by any means, which is awesome. Like, that's hilarious. That's a super cool, fun ability. And then there's Grasp of Hadar, which is similar to one of the ones that was already in the other book, where when you hit somebody with an Eldritch Blast, you could push them 10 feet away from you. Grasp of Hadar allows you to bring them 10 feet towards you. So you can hit them with the Eldritch Blast, bring them in, and then hit them with weaponry. I think that's what this is supposed to be all about here, which seems pretty freaking cool, honestly. Of all the sticks in this book, wizards get the shortest end of the shortest stick. They only get one extra option in the book, which is fine. They've already got a million other options in the other book already. I suppose it's fair, but even so, the option that they do get is actually pretty cool. It's the School of War Magic, which is a kind of mix between Evocation and Abjuration, which allows you to cast harmful spells and also interrupt and prevent spells that other people cast. They work faster in battle and can make themselves harder to hit, especially they've got this cool ability where if you are holding concentration on a spell, you get +2 to your armor class while you hold that concentration. I think it's really cool. To add the ability to basically have two classes of magic, two schools of magic rather, I mean, it feels like this is a really good character for not a whole lot of drawback. There you have it, an overview of some of the cool character options that we have from Xanathar's Guide to Everything. There's a ton more in this book than what I mentioned here, not only for your character building, but also for use of the DM to make your game interesting. A lot of the book is compiled from stuff that was released in the Unearthed Arcana series, which has been playtested enough that it actually gets canonized into the books. There's also revised rules for item creation and the like, but that's a whole different can of worms. A lot of the stuff that you get for this is downtime activities, things like what your character can be doing between adventures, or like when they've got time off or whatever like that. And it's already impossible to make magic items in 5th edition, but this just makes it more difficult. Like, it reduces the time spent doing it, but it increases the amount of effort that it takes, and there's a lot of stuff I don't quite understand about why magic is supposed to be so rare in 5th edition, but whatever, that's a topic for a different video. I do recommend getting your hands on a copy of this, if for nothing else than the extra spells, the extra Warlock invocations, and the DM's tools like random tables that are just, there's so many of them in here. It's so good stuff. Be warned though, it's thinner than I had expected it to be when I first got it. I do hope that you enjoyed this little look into the book. Stars know it's taken me long enough to get to it. If you appreciate this kind of stuff and you want to help me keep doing it, you can drop some support to me directly via the Patreon link that's down there in the description box. You can also hop onto the Discord server that's there and come into the suggestions channel and tell me the kind of stuff that you want to see me talk about in these next videos. You can like, subscribe, share the videos, any of the buttons that are on YouTube, except for the downvote button would be nice if you clicked on them. I really just appreciate you guys watching my stuff in general and supporting me, real talk. I think 2018 is going to be a pretty good year, man. Happy New Year, my friends. And as always, happy rolling.